I'd like to invite everyone here and to look at this presentation on livestock judging. It's been a pretty weird past week or so. Of course, this is one of the things we were going to do, an intro to ag, and obviously that's been canceled. I'm going to go through some livestock judging basics. We'll probably do some, I'll have you do some classes online. So again, like I said, if you want to write some notes down, or if you want to refer to this, in the future for any tests or quizzes or anything like that. Most of you, of course, except for Emma, did dairy cow judging in the fall. So a lot of this is the same, except we're talking about different species. We did dairy cattle out at Bird City. So a lot of this is going to be some review for some of you. Emma, this will be new for you. So, but livestock judging is basically a comparison of animals, just like we did with dairy cattle. If we look a little bit at, here's some stuff here that this would have been from last year's contest. I haven't updated that yet. We would have been at the Fort Hays State Livestock Pavilion, and it would have been, fairly cool. But I guess that's all, a concern we're not going to worry about anymore. So. Anyway, what they usually do is they usually have 8 classes of livestock that you would judge. You would usually have 4 beef cattle classes, what's called heifers, bulls, and market steers. I'm going to review some of these terms here in a bit too for just review. Then you would have 2 swine classes, breeding gilts and market hogs. Again, I will go over those terms. You'll have 2 sheep, goat classes, breeding ewes, market lambs. And you'll have what's called keep cold class of performance cattle. I'll talk about that later on. And then 3 sets of reasons. Yes, I said, yeah. Obviously, you won't be given any reasons because we could do it through Zoom, but I'm not going to worry about that. I may have you guys type up a set of reasons, when we're done. Most of you, other than Emma, remember doing this in dairy cattle, so it's going to be easier for you to do. But we may do that later on. Let's look at a little beef cattle terms. Number 1, a bull is the uncastrated male used for breeding. Everyone should know what that is. Obviously, bull is a big muscular and beef cattle male that can weigh 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. Number 2, a cow is a female that has given birth. So all cows that have given birth, or all beef cattle that have given birth, are called a cow. That are females. Number 3, the heifer, a female that has not given birth. So all cows at some point were a heifer. 4, steer, that's the castrated male. Okay, 99% of all bull calves are castrated. We would have had a Rocky Mountain oyster feed, coming up that we would eat in what was left over from castrating, but obviously that's not going to happen. Okay, if you look at a picture of our ideal market steers, okay, this is a castrated male, probably a year of age, approximately in that range right here. If you look at it, most market steers, if they're ideal, if you're going to look at dairy cat or at judging them, they're long-bodied, very smooth, they're muscular. That's part of the reason why we castrate them to get rid of some of that fat on them. But if you look at different parts on them, okay, you've got your long level rump, straight top line, thick meaty loin. The loin is where the most expensive cuts of beef come from in steers. This is where you have your filet mignon, your ribeye steaks, your center cut steaks, sirloins, things like that. Okay, this has got to be big and long. You have 2 big old huge loin muscles on each side of it. If you've ever went deer hunting, they would call these back straps. And then you have your smooth shoulder. Then there comes a trim, neat dewlap and brisket. Don't want a lot of excess fat right here. Very muscular arm and forearm. If you guys remember, when we talked about meat science earlier in the semester, we talked about this right here. It's called the chuck. The front shoulder is called the chuck in cattle when you talk about the beef cuts. And even though this is the leg, they call this the arm. But anyway, it's got to be big and strong, rugged bone, correct set of front legs. You want to have a bunch of excess fat from the middle. They need to be a long-bodied animal. And like I said, they need to have what's called bold spring or rib. Remember we talked about that in dairy cows. You need to have the chest with a lot of capacity for their lungs and their heart. And then if you look at the correct set of rear legs, you guys, if you remember, we talked about being post-legged and sickle-hocked when we talked about dairy cows. We don't want to look too much curve, because then that's called a sickle-hock. If it's too straight, we call that post-leg, and we don't want that either. And also back here, the quarter. This is called the round in beef cattle. As you get your less fatty cuts like the round steaks and round rumps. This is going to be, we want this really muscular without a lot of excess fat. And again, we want kind of like dairy cows. We want kind of a straight level rump with a high tail set. Not just because obviously they're not going to give birth, but this means they have a lot of muscle up in this area, and they're very free and uniform. Here's a good example of a market steer. Okay, and they use this little thing here to show the straightness of their front leg. Now, your front leg, you want it fairly straight compared to the back leg. This one here is almost a little bit post leg, but you want some straightness. And if you look, it's a very clean animal. You don't see a lot of excess fat. There's a little bit of dewlap. Then some of that may breed characteristics. Okay. This is what's called overconditioned light muscle. So this is a fatty steer. If you look through it, it's pretty simple. It looks very fatty, and it's got a lot of bulginess to it, square shape to the body, patchy of the tail head. You wouldn't be able to see much for bones at all over it. You'd just be able to see a lot of fat. This would be a good example of way show cattle used to look like up until the 1960s. In fact, this is probably from the early 50s. They used to call them, I had a professor in college used to call them little furry little carpet pets because they were short, they had short legs, and they were so fat they'd almost drag the ground. And that was considered an ideal steer probably up until 1965. And now, obviously, we have much taller, leggier steers, much more meaty with a lot less fat, because that's what consumers want. They don't want the fat. They want, they're more health conscious. So you don't see anything like that. If you saw something like that in a group of cattle, that would be an automatic bottom because it's so short and it's so small and so fat. That wouldn't be ideal. Now here's another example of an animal that's not fatty, but it's too light muscle. A lot of times you'll get young steers in a group, especially if they're a younger one of a group of steers. And it has very little muscle on it. There's very little fat, which is good too. But if you look at how it looks, it's just very small. It looks like a calf kind of. You don't want it. It's not going to yield much meat. It's not going to yield much in the loin and in the shoulders and in the round. So this wouldn't be very good either. Here's another example of some terms they use. Okay. Here's another example of a nice, and this would be a heifer right here. She's a nice looking animal with a lot of smoothness and a lot of smoothness in the neck, very high tail head, and not a lot of excess fat. Let's look at some swine terms. Number one, a sow is a female that's given birth. Okay, most sows will have 2 litters in a year. They can have anywhere from 8 to 12 piglets in each litter. Not all of them usually survive, but so they can give birth in a year, anywhere from 16 to 20 to 22 pigs. So you can see you can expand a swine operation pretty quick. Number 2, gilt. That's a female pig that has not given birth. Obviously, all sows are a gilt at some point. 3, a boar. That's a male used for breeding. Surprisingly, a lot of people try to think of boars as being big, huge animals. Actually, the boars are smaller than the sows. A lot of times the boars, might weigh 400 pounds. The sow might weigh 800 pounds. So the boars a lot of times smaller. They're pretty lean. Boars have had, of course, they've not been castrated. They've had their tusks cut, their eye teeth cut, so they don't cut people or slice people. If you look at number 4, you have the barrow. That's the castrated male. This is the equivalent of a steer in beef cattle. And number 5, when we talk about market hogs, those are barrows or gilts. They're about 230 to 250 pounds of market weight. And this is what they take to the packing plant. This is where you get your bacon and your chops and your ham, and most of them from the market hog. Boars cannot be used for meat. Boars are extremely, they have some reason the testosterone in their bloodstream causes a fatty substance that's oily and kind of disgusting looking in their meat, so they're not used at all. Sows usually aren't used either. Gilts can be used because as long as they haven't given birth. And barrows are a lot of times the most are preferred, but that's basically, as long as they weigh about 230, 250 pounds in that range, and they're a barrow or gilt, they're usually used for slaughter. You can like this picture right here. It's not the most ideal picture here, an ideal market barrow. A lot of people think of pigs as being extremely fat, lazy animals, and nowadays most market barrows are long-bodied. They actually have fairly tall legs for a pig. If you look across the back, you can see the loin on them. The loin's not as important as it is with cattle because you don't have your most expensive cuts of meat. The ham is actually the most important part of a pig. And the ham, of course, there's two hams, which is basically the rear end or the rump, what we call the round in cattle. And the round or the ham has to be a big bulging ham without a lot of wrinkles on it, because they want to get a lot of yield on that. Also, you want the legs on them; they want to be freestanding. They don't want to be all hunched over. You want to kind of almost like a long-bodied animal that's almost straight across the back. You don't want to find perfectly straight, but you want them as long and lean as possible. You don't want a bunch of excess fat up on the jowl or underneath the neck. Otherwise, then they become too fatty. In fact, if you look at pork nowadays, pork that you get for the store, like pork chops and pork steaks, they're almost so lean, they're almost dry now. When I was a kid, pork had a lot more fat on it. It was a lot more considered more fatty meat. Pork, other than bacon, is extremely lean white meat now. It's not what I would consider the most. You almost have to add moisture to that when you cook things like chops or pork steaks. Here's a good example of a nice little. This looks like this would be a market gilt. Again, look at that, so nice, a little bit of a curve to its neck or to its back, and the neck is very trim across the underline. If you look at the ham, nice bulging ham without a lot of excess fat on it. Nice straight leg on the front, nice good legs on the back. This is an example of what a pig looks like. It's extremely fat. And it's fatty. It's almost like a square. We don't want that nowadays. Now, that back 55, 60, 70, 80 years ago, this would have been considered a great pig because they were taking the fat and created lard out of it. They like using the lard as a cooking oil or using it for foods or things like that. And now we don't use lard near as much anymore as we used to. Here's an example of a pig. It's not too fatty, but it's too skinny. It might be a younger gilt or a younger barrow. You can see how narrow it is. It's not going to yield a lot of meat, especially look how small the ham is. It's like, there's no meat back here in the back. So again, this will be considered a poor example of a market hog. And then the ideal gilt, when we talk about ideal gilts, when you're going to pick them so that they can give birth to a lot of piglets over their lifetime. And one of the things is because they give birth to more than one, you want a long-bodied animal, and they should have plenty of teats. Okay? Usually you want them to have a minimum of 8 to 10 teats on them. Usually those are counted. And if you look across the back line thing, on the back, you can see how wide and open she is. She has a lot of width from side to side. She isn't fatty. So that's what a breeding gilt looks like for us. Pretty much the same as we look for on a market gilt, but again, you want to look at the reproductive qualities of it. And here's another example. If we look at some of the things we talk about market gilts here: long body, smooth shoulder with long level rump, high tail setting, deep long muscled ham, good angle to the hock, good leg bones, toes placed correctly, prominent, well-spaced underline. They're talking about the teats on it. Okay, wide chest floor, toes placed correctly, deep wide chest floor. Okay, all right, and we only can go about 15 minutes, so I'm going to stop right here, and you can complete the term sheet that I'm going to send you guys, or I will share with you guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks.